Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Hannah and let's talk books. Yes, I did get a haircut that's not gonna be until a few weeks in the vlogs, so yeah, just to answer that. Got it cut and colored and everything. It is not this yellow as the lighting makes it look. Like, I absolutely detest how my hair looks in any of the lighting in this house. But anyway, I have 10, technically 11 books to talk about because I did have one DNF, and half of those are from NetGalley, so I did a lot of reading from there this time. But it is the end of another month, so time for a wrap-up. The first book I read in April is In Between by DM Siciliano. This is one of the books I read from NetGalley. It is just labeled as a straight-up horror, but I'd say it's more horror light. It came out at the end of 2021, and I actually gave this 4 stars. So this one is about mom-to-be Amy. She has what's called Alice in Wonderland syndrome, and before her baby is born, she kind of wants to settle the ghosts of her past, so she goes to her childhood home where her father still lives. However, the more time she spends there, the longer the lines between like reality, memories, and time just all combine. So this is 100% an unreliable narrator book, so you definitely have to pay attention what's being said, and it's definitely one where you probably aren't really going to understand like what the hell is going on most of the time, but it was still a really enjoyable read for me. But you can very easily get lost in the plot here. I really feel like you go on a journey with Amy throughout this book. The writing is just so colorful and vivid that it makes it really easy to picture what's happening, and the scenes flowing into each other is done really well. But pretty much as the reader, you're as confused as Amy is, and that's kind of why I think it's like going on a journey with her, but it helps in understanding her emotions and her reactions to everything. In this kind of story, it's very common for there to be an ambiguous ending. However, that's actually not the case here. It has a really solid ending. We find out exactly what happens to everyone and why it happens, but going into the story with an open imagination will definitely help you get the most enjoyment out of it. And although I can see how this book won't be for everyone, I think it's a solid entry into this genre. Next, I read Bonjour Tristesse by Françoise Séguin, which Bonjour Tristesse in English is Hello Sadness. This is a French classic, came out in 1954, and I also gave this 4 stars, so we are off to a good start here. So this is actually a novella, so it's quite short. We follow our 17-year-old MC Cecile and her summer that she spends on the French Riviera with her father. And her father is like the stereotypical rich playboy kind of type. And when Cecile feels that like her freedom and her relationship with her father is threatened, then she kind of comes up with like this scheme to try and get rid of the woman that he is in love with. So when this was originally released, it was considered very scandalous. The author herself was only 18 when this was published, and so with all this like hype around it, it shot up to #1 in France and was there for like many years. Everyone is talking about how scandalous it is and everything. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be a juicy book. But that is not the case at all. Like, I finished this and I'm just like, why was this considered scandalous? Like, obviously I know times have changed, but I mean, but not to the extent where I can't figure out why it was perceived this way. There was nothing graphic in this book. Like, I thought maybe there'd be some sex scenes, but it was always fade to black. There was never really any descriptions of anything. And so I kind of don't understand the reputation behind this. But this is a French classic. Also, I had expected this book to be a lot more surface level, because it's just like, yeah, teenager, French Riviera, oh boy. In actuality, Cecile, the main character, just puts herself through so much mental torment. I was pretty shocked, and it showed that how she was capable of very like complex emotions, and all the characters in here felt quite real, and so I really appreciated that. And the way it ended actually made me enjoy this novella even more. It is quite a surprise, and this ended up being a win for me. This was also the March pick for the local book club that I'm in, but since I was in Sicily for the end of March, I wasn't able to go to the meeting, so I just didn't read it until now. The next 3 books are actually all NetGalley books, and usually when I read NetGalley stuff, a lot of times it ends up being manga or graphic novels, so sometimes I won't talk about what I've read from there unless it's something I really enjoyed, just to kind of save time. But then I kind of realized, like, that's literature as well, like that's art as well, and so it deserves to be talked about. So I'm not gonna really skip those anymore, but I know I do need to talk faster when I go through the books that I'm talking about because I take a lot of time and I apologize for that. But anyway, the next book I read is called Nighttime for Justice 2 Volume 1 by Maki Miyoshi. This is a sci-fi manga that just came out on April 12th, and I also gave this 4 stars, so first 3 are good here. So this one's a bit different. We follow an MC whose name that like no one can remember, and I don't remember it either, so... But she's just kind of content in being like the background character in people's lives. Like she doesn't want to draw attention to herself or anything, but she takes like these nightly strolls like in the middle of the night. She has like a special spot she goes to look at the stars and everything. And one night she goes there and runs into the popular guy, except this time he's claiming to be an alien. So this was a lot more original than a lot of like high school scenarios that you tend to encounter in manga, so I definitely appreciated that. The story itself moves very quickly, but it feels right for this kind of book. This first volume sets up the situation that will definitely drive the plot forward in later volumes, so this is something that I think I will want to continue reading. It's also like a love triangle, but there's only technically 2 people, so that is another part of the concept that I think is a bit more interesting and makes it more original as well. And it's just like a funny little twist on things. Although I do wish there was a little more detail in the art itself. It does suit this story as it's like cute and fluffy, and that's kind of like how the story has been so far. At the end of this volume, there was a message from the author stating that volume 2 would be fleshing out the characters a bit more, which I love because that was kind of what I was looking for more of at the end of this volume. If I do continue with this, I'm looking forward to seeing more of the characters and learn more about them, especially the main girl in her home life. But yeah, it's not every day that you get to read a cute love story with aliens, so I thought that was kind of fun. Next is another manga, except this one is called Tomorrow Make Me Yours by Karuka Miyami. This is an LGBT romance manga. It will come out on May 24th of this year, except I only gave this one 2 stars. So the summary for this one is quite simple. Classmates Yuki and Hayato, they instantly fall in love with each other, and that's it. That's the story. So this one adds nothing new to the high school romance genre. It is the classic trope of popular guy instantly falls in love with the shy guy kind of deal. And there's actually very minimal drama here. Like, it makes no sense to me. So there really isn't much of a plot at all, and it just kind of rushes through itself because this is only a one-shot. Like, I really wish there had been more to the story itself, like maybe them revealing that they were dating to their friends, or maybe going on a date or something that, you know, makes sense with relationships. But we don't get anything that builds the relationship up. It's just like literally quick meeting, instantly fall in love, tiny bit of miscommunication, and then boom, it's the end. And I just ended it feeling like I didn't know the characters at all, and it just didn't catch my attention. So be aware, this manga is 18+, which I did not realize when I requested to read it. It was not obvious to me, so I had a little surprise at the end there, but since this whole story is so freaking rushed, even that wasn't really like graphic or anything. It was just like 2 panels long, boom, done, moving on kind of thing. So with there constantly being manga released, especially in this genre, I honestly just think this one is just going to be buried under all the other releases, especially considering that it's a one-shot. Also, I forgot to say in the beginning, I apologize for the construction noises, but it's getting to where we need to have the window open because it's getting warmer, but there's literally construction happening on like all sides of us, so I can't do much about that. I am sorry. But next, I read The House of Drought by Dennis Mombauer. I absolutely love this cover, like it is so gorgeous. This is a gothic horror that comes out July 14th of this year, and unfortunately I gave it 2.5 stars. So I'm actually going to read the summary directly from Goodreads because I have some things to say about it. But Goodreads says, a haunted house for the climate change era. On the island of Sri Lanka, at a colonial mansion between the forest and the paddy fields, a caretaker arrives with 4 children in tow after pledging to keep them safe. When violent thugs storm the house demanding that Ushu repay his debt, young Jasmine and the other children hide in an upstairs bathroom where a running tap opens a gateway to escape. But the dry house is not the only force at work in the place where the forest and the estate meet. Something else stirs in the trees, something ancient, something that demands retribution. The sap mother bides her time, watching and learning from the house's inhabitants. She burrows beneath the foundations of the dry house, hungry for atonement. Pulled between these warring powers, Jasmine must choose between saving those trapped in the mansion's bulging stomachs and preparing the house for when the mother emerges again. So, this summary is misleading, especially this last sentence. That does not happen in the book at all. That is not a thing. And this summary, makes me want to read this book again because it sounds so interesting. But that's just not how it turns out. I don't think I've ever really read a summary that so poorly represents what the book is. So yeah, I'm a bit frustrated with that. But the way this book came about is actually kind of interesting. There's literally a writer's group that writes books specifically, fiction books, specifically about climate change. And I think on that front, this novella is a success in discussing climate change and what happens with that. But it falls flat in characterization and storytelling. Like I said, this is a novella. It's a very quick read. It's just over 100 pages, and it tries to accomplish too much with too few pages 100%. So this is not told in a linear fashion. We have different timelines. We have 5 different perspectives. We have, with each new perspective, we are told the ending first, and then it backtracks and tells us how we get there, with new characters constantly being introduced and new perspectives constantly being introduced. I did find it a bit confusing because there are so many forgettable characters, because each perspective doesn't just come with the main perspective, it comes with its own cast of side characters, and for 100 pages that's a lot. So in the end, all these characters' perspectives just kind of feel like wasted space. And another thing that made it more confusing is that all these characters felt the same. I don't understand if this was done intentionally or not, but I also didn't realize till the end of the book that this was written by a white German guy who has been living in Sri Lanka for a few years now, I think. But all the characters had the exact same voice, and I mean even same accent kind of thing. They all talked exactly the same, the nuances, ways of speaking, even though all of these characters came from different regions of Sri Lanka, and they also were from different, what is the word? My brain just, some were poor, some came from rich families. My brain still can't come up with the word. But just from all different walks of life, and so they should speak different, but they did not in this book. But it was incredibly noticeable and really took me out of the story. In my opinion, I feel like this novella really needs to be fleshed out a bit more, because there were moments in the book where characters would all of a sudden understand how the house works, but that was never explained to us, and it never made sense why these characters just all of a sudden knew this information. Also, the house itself worked in contradictory ways, but this is something that I feel just should have been brought in on a bit more, because it just seemed like people were taking huge jumps in logic and there was nothing to support what they were doing, and it just didn't make sense. But overall for me, this just turned into an okay story. I feel like the intent behind it shines a lot better than the actual work. Next, I read Heartstopper Volume 2 by Alice Oseman. This is an LGBT graphic novel, and it came out 2019, and I gave this 4 stars. Not much to say here, pretty much everyone on the earth knows what Heartstopper is at this point. A Netflix show of it just came out, which I have not started yet, but I've been hearing great praise about. But this is pretty much just a cute graphic novel of a story between 2 guys that are falling in love. Next is a book that I just put a reading vlog out for, actually, and that is The Mad Women's Ball by Victoria Ma. So this is historical fiction. The French version of this came out in 2019, and the English version came out in 2021. My brain's giving up apparently. And I gave this 3 stars, almost forgot to say that. So this takes place at the Salpêtrière Asylum in Paris in 1885. The asylum is at the height of its neuroscience research, and Professor Charcot, who is the head guy here, head honcho, he is doing these hypnosis demonstrations using his actual patients. The head nurse, Genevieve, has always kind of been really loyal to Charcot and gone along with his plans. But then a new patient comes to the asylum named Eugenie, who claims to be able to talk to the dead. And Eugenie tells Genevieve that she has been talking to Blandine, which is Genevieve's deceased sister. Also, if you watch that reading vlog, you'll notice I say Genevieve instead of Genevieve. That's because I did not see the first V when I was reading this book. I did not realize till I was watching the movie and saw in the subtitles and heard her name be said. I was like, yeah, I've been saying that wrong the whole time, because my brain just blocked out the other V. So yeah, it's French, it's Genevieve, not Genevieve, so just putting that out there. So, as you can tell from the reading vlog, my favorite part of reading this was looking up the history of the Salpêtrière and going to see it and just learning about the real life people and everything that kind of inspired this book. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts on that, definitely check out the reading vlog, because I had a really fun time reading it, but the book itself just wasn't the greatest. There's also a movie on Amazon Prime based off of this story, and I watched that and talk about that as well in the reading vlog. Next, I read Rabbit Island by Elvira Navarro, which is an awesome name. This is a short story collection. It came out in Spanish in 2019 and came out in English in 2021, just like the other book. And I gave this 3 stars. So these are 11 stories that were originally written in Spanish. Christina McSweeney is the translator. The Goodreads description makes this out to be like surrealist horror stories, but honestly, they're just stories with no plot, really. So a lot of these stories feel just very slice of life, or like a chapter taken out of a longer book. The characters are kind of battling like their minds and perceptions, and the lines between reality and fantasy are just crisscrossing everywhere. But this collection in general was just a very mixed bag for me. I'm not going to talk about all the individual stories and ratings and everything, but I averaged out all the individual ratings, and that's where I got the 3 stars from. But nothing in this was a 5-star read for me. The highest was 4.5 stars. The lowest being, I think, 1 star actually. So definitely a mix here. Probably something for everybody, but it just kind of felt like a lot of nonsense. So this next one is my DNF, unfortunately, and it was the book club pick for April. There were 3 of us at the meeting, and 2 of us got halfway. 1 of us finished it, but even the woman that finished it, like, still doesn't really understand what happened. Like, it just kind of ends. She did it on Audible, and so did the other person. They both listened to it, and she played like the last little bit of the book for us, and it's just like, it literally just ends. So pretty much none of us really understand like what was going on in this book. But that is Fieldwork in Ukrainian Sex by Oksana Zabusko. Yeah, Zabusko. Okay. I looked up on YouTube how to say her last name, but like now I'm second guessing myself. But this is Ukrainian fiction, and it's also categorized as poetry. It came out in 1996, and like I said, this is my DNF. So I'm going to read the summary from Goodreads, as I think that's probably the best description of it. But it says, Fieldwork in Ukrainian Sex became an international phenomenon when it shot to #1 on the Ukrainian bestseller list and remained there throughout the 1990s. The novel is narrated in first-person streams of thought by a sharp-tongued poet with an, oh gosh, I can't read today, with an irreverently honest voice. She is visiting professor of Slavic studies at Harvard, and her exposure to American values and behaviors conspires with her yearning to break free from Ukrainian conventions. In her despair over a recently ended affair, she turns her attention to the details of her lover's abusive behavior, and detailing the power her Ukrainian lover wielded over her, and in admitting the underlying reasons for her attraction to him, she begins to see the chains that have defined her as a Ukrainian woman, and in doing so exposes and calls into question her country's culture of fear and repression at the very time that it wrestled its way toward independence. So, I didn't write an actual review on this because it's a DNF for me, but for me it wasn't the content of this that I didn't like, it was the style it was written in, 1000%. There are no chapters. Apparently in the Audible version, like, there are actually actual chapters and stuff, but not in the Kindle version, which is how I read it. Everything is a run-on sentence. There are no paragraphs. Everything is just a brick of words, and she constantly interrupts herself in these sentences. Like there's constantly like dashes or brackets, and the brackets and stuff will go on for so long I forget that it's in a bracket until I see the end, and then I'm like, oh my god, where did this start? So yeah, she needed to use periods a bit more, and this just kind of drove me crazy trying to read. I couldn't imagine listening to it. Like, no way. I bet that's even more confusing, but I absolutely hate this style. I can't. It's not a style that I'm comfortable reading. I know it has to do with part of like the poetry part of this book, but like, not for me. Sorry. That's why I DNF'd it. I tried to read it in like smaller chunks, so I'm thinking like, hey, if I just read it here or there, maybe I can get through it, because it's not that long. It's less than 200 pages, and after 3 like reading sessions, I just couldn't. Like that 4th time I picked it up, I just stared at the page and I'm like, nope, I can't. I'm sorry. So nothing against the content of the book or anything. I thought it was actually interesting, and I did think it was written in a pretty way, but that style I could not get past. Next is another NetGalley read, and that is Silk Hills by Ryan Ferrier, Brian Level, and Kate Sharon. This is a horror graphic novel that will come out on June 14th of this year, and I gave it 3 stars, which seems like more than I should have given it. I don't know why I gave it 3 stars. I feel like I thought it was like a 2 or something, so seeing that 3 stars kind of threw me off a bit. This is another one where I'm going to read the Goodreads summary just because I think it does it so well. When Beth Wills comes to Silk Hills, a small Appalachian town that's seen better days since the mines were abandoned, she expected a bit of a culture shock, but not like this. Beth is someone who has a talent for finding people who don't want to be found, and when she's called to Silk Hills by a local titan of industry, she can tell that something's not right. Little does she know, Silk Hills was once booming, but the only reason people tend to come through town anymore is to buy Mothman merchandise. Completely understandable. Before long, Beth finds out just how raw things can get in the woods as her search for a missing troubled youth finds her running afoul of the local drug trade, 2 friendly creepers, a very sinister deer, that is not a joke, and psychoactive moth dust. So this is one of those where you finish it, close the book, and just go, what the fuck did I just read? It's gross, psychedelic, flat out weird. There's also a heavy dose of body horror here, so this is definitely not going to be everyone's cup of tea. So the plot here felt very disjointed to me. Scenes would switch so quickly that it felt like even the characters were being left behind. I would have loved to have had more lore about the town. Like, oh, I was looking for that lore and there was nothing. We weren't really left with any reasons to care about the characters and like their fates or anything. And instead of leaving me feeling like horrified, I just kind of left with the feeling of, huh, that was a thing. So at first, I thought I was okay with the art style of this, but it gets extremely cartoony very fast, and I mean like Saturday morning cartoons kind of deal, and that just didn't vibe with the story at all, at least for me. Oh, and the characters themselves, they weren't drawn in the way that they even described each other, and their looks were very inconsistent. And I'm really not sure if that was done on purpose or not, but it's not obvious if it was. Overall, it's a very brutal story. Gore and body horror are everywhere here. They're very major components. There are also depictions of PTSD and drug use, so if you think you should, you might want to look up content warnings for this before picking it up. So I'm one of those who absolutely loves the story of Mothman, one of my favorite cryptids. So I was really looking forward to this one, but I just feel like the storytelling needs to be tightened up to really make this one shine. And finally, to the end, I read Dark Neighborhood by Vanessa. I also looked up how to pronounce this. Onwumezi. All right, Onwumezi, got that. This is a short story collection that came out last year. However, this is the worst rated on the list at only 1.5 stars. So this is a debut collection that has 7 stories. I can't really tell you anything more than that because a lot of these stories just made absolutely no sense. So when you're dreaming, do you know that feeling like when you're trying to write or text in a dream and the words just are not coming out right, like stuff is misspelled, stuff's out of order, and you're just frustrated, like trying to type out what you want to say and it's just not doing it? That is the feeling of this book. This entire book feels like that feeling. I truly have no idea how anyone is supposed to understand what's happening in these stories besides the author. these were all written in a very experimental style where most of the sentences are like, the words are out of order to the point where characters in the book are commenting on that. There are also random gaps between words where it literally looks like a cat stepped on the space bar while she was typing kind of deal. But like, I just don't have the brain power to follow along with that and figure out what in the world this is trying to say to me. So there's a blurb on the back of this book, and also I own it, so why didn't I hold it up? But whatever. It says, she sends the English off on a great line of flight from which it returns as poetry. However, I have to disagree. Like, poetry is supposed to make you feel stuff, and I just kind of got a headache from this. Like, poetry, you have your own interpretation of what's happening, and with this, I just got absolutely nothing from. It isn't even like there's pretty words or lyrical composition or rhythm or anything that would make you think like, hey, this is poetry. Instead, it's literally just like someone throwing letters on a fucking computer and just seeing what comes out of it. I was hoping that I would get used to it because every story except for the third one is written in this style, but it just never happened. Like, that's the reason why I didn't DNF, because I read the first two stories, which are in this style. Then I read the third one, which was in a straightforward style, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool, maybe it's going to be more like that. No, then the rest of them were just back to the other style, and pretty much got worse, if anything. So in the end, the description of this book made me think that it was going to be right up my alley, but unfortunately, this is not for me at all. And that is all. I am currently reading The Dogs of Babel, which there's 2 days left of April, and I don't think I'm going to finish it in those 2 days, which is why I'm filming this now. So that'll probably be the first book of May for next time. But that was quite a spread of books. There was a lot of stuff in there. So as always, thank you for hanging out with me. Hopefully you found something new to read and found some things to stay away from. And until next time, bonne journée and au revoir.